Imagine an era of football when the world's greatest attackers walked the pitch. Maradona, Ronaldo, Platini, Zidane, Romário, and other unstoppable legends, all in their absolute prime. And in that same era, one man stood against them all. He didn't just stop them, he redefined the art of defending. With flawless technique, unmatched physical strength, and a sense of fair play that made him respected by rivals and adored by fans. The most feared and yet the most admired defender the game has ever seen. And if you were to pick your dream team of all time, the name Paolo Maldini would always be there.
Toughest defender you face?
Maldini.
Football has always been about dynasties, legacies that echo through generations. And in Milan, there was one name that already carried the weight of history: Maldini. Cesare Maldini was not just a player, he was the captain who lifted the European Cup for AC Milan in 1963. He embodied leadership, intelligence, and loyalty. So when Paolo, his son, was born in 1968, expectations weren't just high, they were gigantic. But destiny often hides in the smallest moments. Paolo wasn't handed greatness, he chased it. As a boy, he spent hours in the backyard with his siblings, coached by his father, absorbing every detail of the game. It wasn't just football, it was education, discipline, a way of life. At just 10 years old, Paolo joined Milan's youth academy. He was skinny, quiet, and almost fragile in appearance. Yet there was something different, a vision, a calmness on the ball, an elegance in defending that no coach could teach. He wasn't just learning how to stop attackers, he was learning how to control time and space itself. And then, in 1985, fate came calling. At only 16 years old, Paolo Maldini was thrown into the fire, debuting for AC Milan against Udinese. The San Siro was expecting a boy. What they saw was something else entirely. A teenager who played with the composure of a veteran, who tackled with precision, who defended with maturity beyond his years. The whispers began immediately. This is not just Cesare's son, this is the beginning of a new Maldini. And so at an age when most kids are still dreaming of football, Paolo Maldini had already stepped into destiny. Not as the shadow of his father, but as the heir to a dynasty that was only just beginning.
Toughest defender you face?
Maldini.
The mid-1980s were a turbulent time for AC Milan. The club had seen glory in the 1960s, but also disgrace, relegations, and financial chaos in the years that followed. Milan needed a savior, someone who could restore pride to the red and black. And from the academy, a young Paolo Maldini was stepping into the light. Still just a teenager, he became a starter almost overnight. What set him apart wasn't only his talent, it was his maturity, his calmness, his elegance in defending. While others relied on strength or desperation, Maldini defended with intelligence. He didn't dive recklessly into tackles. He anticipated, intercepted, and neutralized danger before it could even begin. By the late 1980s, under Arrigo Sacchi, a new Milan was born, and at its heart stood Maldini, alongside legends like Baresi, Costa Curta, and Tassotti. Together, they built one of the most impenetrable backlines football has ever seen. But the moment that truly defined Maldini came in 1994, the Champions League final in Athens. Milan against Johan Cruyff's dream team Barcelona. The world expected Barcelona to dominate. Milan were missing key players, including Baresi and Costa Curta, and yet, what happened that night became legend. Milan destroyed Barcelona 4-0. The so-called Dream Team was humbled. And at the center of it all was Paolo Maldini, not just defending, commanding, anticipating, leading. He embodied perfection itself. That night didn't make Maldini famous. He was already respected. But it crowned him as something more. the universal symbol of the art of defending, the Prince of Milan had become a king. With AC Milan, Paolo Maldini was living a dream: Champions League titles, legendary teammates, a dynasty being built in red and black. But with Italy, the story was very different. Wearing the Azzurra was not just an honor, it was a burden. The nation of 3 World Cups demanded glory. And Maldini would spend his entire international career chasing a trophy that never came. In 1990, Italy hosted the World Cup. Maldini was only 21, yet already one of the brightest stars of the team. Alongside Baresi, he formed a wall that conceded just 2 goals in the entire tournament. But in the semi-final, against Argentina, Italy's dream ended in tears. Penalties in Naples, Diego Maradona celebrating on Italian soil. 4 years later, in the United States, came Maldini's greatest chance. He carried Italy all the way to the final against Brazil. For 120 minutes, he defended like a gladiator. But history turned cruel again. A penalty shootout. Roberto Baggio missing the decisive kick. And Maldini, who had given everything, could only watch as Brazil lifted the trophy. In 1998, Maldini wore the captain's armband at the World Cup in France. Italy once again showed its defensive strength, marching into the quarterfinals. But against the hosts, destiny repeated itself. A goalless draw. Another penalty shootout. And once again, Italy fell. For Maldini, it was once more the same cruel story: honor, sacrifice, and heartbreak. Euro 2000 brought another heartbreak. Italy led against France in the final, until a goal in stoppage time shattered their dreams. Minutes later, David Trezeguet's golden goal sealed another cruel defeat. And then, in 2002, came the most painful of all, the World Cup in Korea. Against the hosts, Italy were eliminated amid chaos and controversy. Disallowed goals, questionable refereeing decisions. It was Maldini's last appearance in a World Cup. 4 tournaments, over a decade of loyalty and sacrifice, but no silverware. For Milan, Maldini was a prince, then a king. For Italy, he was a tragic hero, an immortal defender, forever denied the ultimate prize. By the mid-1990s, Paolo Maldini was no longer just the Prince of Milan. He had become its captain, the heir to Franco Baresi, the legendary leader who had guided Milan for more than a decade. To inherit that armband was more than a responsibility. It was a crown, and Maldini wore it with the same elegance he carried on the pitch. In an era when money and ambition lured great players away, Maldini remained loyal. Countless giants tried to tempt him, but Paolo was different. He belonged to one club, one shirt, one cathedral of football, San Siro. Under his leadership, Milan reached the pinnacle again. In 2003, Maldini lifted the Champions League trophy, exactly 40 years after his father. 2 captains, 2 eras, 1 dynasty. But football is cruel, and in 2005 in Istanbul came the nightmare. The Champions League final against Liverpool. Milan led 3-0 at halftime. Maldini himself had scored in the very first minute. It seemed like destiny, the perfect ending to a perfect night. Then came the collapse. Liverpool's impossible comeback. 3 goals in 6 minutes, extra time, penalties. Milan defeated in one of the most shocking nights in football history. Maldini stood tall until the end, but even he could not hold back the storm. And the question lingered, would this be his legacy? A captain defined not by triumph, but by tragedy. For 2 years, the ghost of Istanbul haunted AC Milan. That night in 2005, when Liverpool produced the most shocking comeback in football history, was a scar that refused to heal. And for Paolo Maldini, the captain who had given everything, it was the cruelest wound of all. But true legends are not defined by tragedy, they rise from it. In 2007, destiny offered a second chance. Milan once again faced Liverpool in the Champions League final, this time in Athens. Maldini was 38 years old. Most players his age had long retired, but he was still there, commanding, leading, unyielding. And this time, there would be no collapse. Milan defeated Liverpool 2-1, and Paolo Maldini, after more than 2 decades of loyalty, lifted the Champions League trophy once more. The oldest captain ever to do so. It was redemption, it was justice, it was immortality, yet even immortals must say goodbye. In 2009, after 25 years in the red and black, Maldini walked onto the San Siro pitch for the final time. More than 80,000 fans rose to their feet, not just to applaud a player, but to honor a lifetime of loyalty, discipline, and greatness. When the final whistle blew, an era ended. AC Milan retired the number 3 shirt, reserved only for his sons, should they ever follow in his footsteps. It was not just a farewell, it was the sealing of a dynasty. Over 1,000 appearances, 7 league titles, 5 European Cups, 25 years at a single club. But numbers alone cannot capture what Paolo Maldini represented. He was the defender who turned football into art, the captain who embodied loyalty in its purest form, the wall that even the greatest strikers could not break. He was feared, he was admired, he was eternal. And if you were to pick your dream team of all time, Paolo Maldini would always be there.